My name is Natalie Hall. I am one of the co-founders of Social Convention and also the executive producer. You know what? When I'm faced with a lot of people, I forget people's names, even though I know them very well. So I'm going to have you all introduce yourselves.
It means I can lie and say a different name.
Yes.
I'm Thomas Buckley. I'm an artist. I work in digital and emerging technologies.
I'm Fran Sanderson. Sorry.
No.
I'm Fran Sanderson. I'm Director of Arts and Culture Investments and Programmes at Nesta, which is the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts.
My name is Nimrod Vardi. I'm the Creative Director at Arbyte Gallery. We're an art charity dealing with digital arts in London City Island, just on the other side of the conversation.
Yeah. Stone's throw away.
And I'm Cimeon Ellerton-Kay, also co-founder of Social Convention, exec director, and in-house nerd.
Brilliant. Let's start. So, there's been a lot of talk about the venue of the future and what that means. And, at Social Convention, there are two things that we're very passionate about. And one of them is delivering and understanding and finding new ways of being with audiences, of having a more equal relationship with audiences, and artists and institutions, having it be networked instead of sort of hierarchical. So we're always trying to find new ways to have a lot of fun with people. And then digital hybridity is a big thing for us as well, because we believe that's sort of the only way forward. It's not the future, it's the now. So we kind of thought this was a nice little provocation, and I personally find Venue of the Future a little flabby, a little inexact. So I wanted to dig into it a bit and just start it off as a provocation. So actually I'd love to start with Nimrod, because you are opening a big space yourself. You have a space and you're opening a bigger space, which is really exciting, and please do tell us about it. But I'd love to hear from you. When you hear Venue of the Future, what do you think of? What do you think that means?
Okay.
Can you speak up, please?
I will try. I will try to project my voice. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's very exciting to see the space. It's incredible to see a space that's ongoing and building and wearing those hats and being in this. So well done and congratulations. I think maybe a bit more background. We started in Hackney Week in 2013 in a small kind of second floor space of the studio complex. And the idea back then was to really, I think for me at least, starting this venue or this gallery was to understand this kind of relation between the audience and the objects and the artworks. And I thought that through digital arts or new media and immersive things, the gap of experience can become smaller and smaller. A bit as opposed to painting and sculpture, where there's always a gap. So I was really trying to understand what it means to explore and to work within these areas. And that worked very well. The landscape in London was and still is somewhat limited when it comes to digital and media arts. And then 2017 we were given a great opportunity to move from Hackney Week, which is known as a very cultural and creative area, to London City Island. We were the first venue and the first cultural organization that came on site, and that was very exciting. Then the English National Ballet moved and opened, and I think we managed to attract very good numbers of audience that will come and explore new parts of London, kind of at the entrance to the Royal Docks, and show them not just what our gallery can do, but expand the experience. You can go to Trinity by Wharf and the Royal Docks and these other things. I think for us, now, and since COVID, things have gone, touch wood, if I may say, quite well, because we've been working within digital arts and online for quite a long time. So the transition is very simple for us. And we managed to triple our audiences online from 80,000 to over 300,000. And it was great success to show us and our stakeholders and our audience that things can be done slightly different, more agile, more flexible. And I think when you think about venues of the future, is, for me at least, is this agility and this really understanding how you can work within crisis and what is about to happen and how to be flexible and dynamic. And I think as opposed to kind of larger institutions, it's harder, it's easier with a smaller or mid-scale organizations. I guess going to what you said about the larger venue, we've been looking for a space to move on to for quite a long time, for about 3-4 years, and through the searches around London, after a while the landlord approached us and said, we have a site on building on site, what do you want to do with it? And our intention is to set up London's first digital art centre, something that's been missing from the landscape forever. It's a bit unclear why, because all major cities in the world has one. And they accepted the proposal, and we're now working on this. And for us, it's very exciting to be able to say that we're about to open London's first digital art centre next year. It will be, I guess, first element will open in October, which will be workspaces, and the galleries in the following year, around June, July. And the idea is to very much have a space that is production, education, and exhibition spaces. And that's for us kind of the future, this cycle or of those production exhibition experiences. I hope I answered that.
Amazingly.
Absolutely, and I'd like Cimeon to pick up on all of that.
But I think it's funny, like, we've known of you, but we've only met very recently, and it's like you just reached inside my mind, because I think that you talked about agility and flexibility, and that's so important, and that's something we are really trying to build physically into the space. How do we make it as flexible as possible? But also that sense of every phase of the production happening together. I think traditionally we've separated them all, and that's really problematic when you work in complexity and at speed, which digital hybrid always is. We need so many more skills, so we have to be together closer all the time. And the education, the production, the presentation, it can't be this kind of geographically and time-based separation anymore. We need to be in closer proximity and shorter cycles. So well, that's what I think anyway. What do you think, Fran?
There's a couple of things that both of you said that I really want to sort of focus on. One is about relationships and reframing relationships, and I feel like one of the opportunities for COVID that we haven't quite fully exploited yet is how do organisations reframe that relationship between visitors and an organisation, so venue specifically, where it's less of a customer provider and it's more of a member, stakeholders, community that you're building around, and how you make a business model out of that. I don't know. There are bits of experimentation going on around the world about kind of extended visitor passes and that sort of thing. But I feel like that's something that's really needed in terms of connection as well, because that is what people want. They want to be able to, you want to extend that post-show feeling to beyond 10 minutes chatting to people as you leave the theatre, or you really want to build that community around a piece of work. And some of that is happening, you see it online, on Reddit around a show or something. People want to talk about the stuff that they're seeing, and that in itself is a creative force. So making that foundry of creativity, I think is really, and that's something that is essentially a hybrid space. It's got to be a hybrid thing, and enabling that area is really vital, I think, for kind of creating productive creative spaces. And the other thing about digital, I think that the pipeline it's really difficult, right? Because lots of the stuff, I feel that a lot of the development funding has been focused on VR, which is essentially it's quite an inward, introspective experience. Yeah. It's very location-based usually because, we're in the situation that's very specific about Oculus and, there being one platform. But I feel like there's a bit of a lack of imagination about what digital could be sometimes in funding situations, and it does feel like that, and I'm a massive fan of VR and extended reality, but I just think people go, oh, digital tech, VR, and actually there's so much more than that. And I think that thinking about projection mapping and all sorts of other things that make immersive spaces, and I hope that your space will be much more than lots of people with headsets on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you brought up about, like, when we say hybridity, it's not just about physical and digital, it's about unlearning the differences between artists and audiences, unlearning the differences between the spaces that we experience art in, unlearning the differences between how we're supposed to act in places and how we're supposed to be, and how can we sort of make art communally, because it doesn't happen until people come and experience it. So that's the act, right? And I think when we talk about hybridity, it's good to remember that there's a larger cycle around that. And I mean, speaking of pipeline, Thomas, you're kind of, I mean, a rising star in this like digital performance and art world, and we absolutely adore working with you. And yeah, I think it would be really interesting to hear from you how you, like, where have you found the tools to kind of grow in this space, and what do you feel is lacking in terms of that support?
I mean, I'm still kind of thinking about the vendor that stuck in my head, and I think I'm just really echoing what the rest of the panel is saying, and actually I think, for me, the thing that gets me most excited about working with a venue is its potential, in a way. It's not the things that are in place, it's the things that could happen, the surprises, and that's flexibility. And I think I'm hearing that in what both of you are saying as well, about flexibility. And again, this idea of rapid cycles, this pipeline that can be iterative really, really quickly with groups of people. I think that makes more interesting work, at least for me. I love doing work in residence. I love sort of being able to do that stuff where you can go and connect with the space, connect with the community, connect with other creatives that you're making work with, and have everything in place to very quickly make something that isn't. I think there's kind of, for me at least, people who are maybe less digitally working see a lot of these things as being really expensive with huge companies involved and lots of tech and lots of kit. But actually, you know, if you've got a group of like-minded people, you can put it together quickly. You know, it doesn't need to cost £1 million a ticket. It doesn't need to, you know, you can do it. And I think there's a strange myth there, and I think that's why I'm really excited by ideas of hybrid working and art shows and spaces that come alive, because you can do stuff, and it can be quite raw, the stuff that we make.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean, I just think that's so important because, you know, Cimeon and I worked with Fran on a really brilliant project for Creativity Culture Capital, as sort of, let's talk about what the RSC Dream project, what the legacy of that project was, and that was obviously like this incredible, incredible meeting of audiences and funders and, you know, technology and companies. And it's stunning when you get to see, oh gosh, this is what can happen. But then there's also this thing of like, well, I have my phone, you know, and what can I do with what I have? Where can I start here? And what is interesting about working with the tools that I currently have, instead of kind of saying, well, that's for, you know, £5 million budgets or something like that. So I think that rapid iteration of stuff, having a space where you go, hey, let's just make something. What does this look like?
I mean, I love work that's really digital, but is really accessible to be an audience in a different way. We're so used to seeing a rough sketch by someone and standing back and thinking, wow, what wonderful art. But what's the equivalent in a new venue, which is what is a digital sketch that we can kind of maybe not stand back from, but lean in, take a photo, edit, collaborate with the tools that we're all carrying. And that's where I think things get really exciting.
Absolutely. Do you quickly want to just talk about the game you made in residence with us? Because I'm obsessed with it. I really am.
So I was on residence with the Artist Lab programme with Social Convention, and it's one of the best things I've ever done. I'm not even just saying that because they're right here. But it genuinely was. And I think maybe if I showed you the work, you might say it was rubbish, but actually it's really important stuff. And I made a few different things. I think I was in residence for 4 weeks. the first week I made a projector that would flash into my face every time someone in real time tweeted my name. It was quite accosting, and yes. The second week I did something even weirder, which I won't go into, and then the third week I made a game, and it was a game where you're a little ghost, and you were in a greenhouse, and you had to tell me a secret. So you typed in a secret, and depending on the secret that you told me, it would grow a garden in the greenhouse, and it would send me your garden. I'd never know your secret, but I could see your garden. Which is weird. It's a weird, really weird, but it's
beautiful.
I mean, it was really interesting to the residency because it was, I think you've both got a really interesting perspective on audience, and I think there wasn't a focus to maybe meet a lot of people in a certain way or reach a lot of people with a certain type of work, but this kind of weird mini-clip style 90s game, I think probably resonated with who I needed to resonate at that time. But yeah, it was a great experience.
I think, having that space to experiment is really important. And you know, the project we were talking about, we were very lucky that was funded by Arbyte UK, and we were able to experiment in something that had been core in the RSC Dream project was, well, this whole project is about innovation and interaction. So how are we really just going to write a report? Isn't that a bit boring? So, you know, we don't want a PDF. But I'm not sure the audience that was going to read the report was really ready for what we did. So luckily it's online for a while and our audience can catch up with us. But I think, you know, you've just got to be able to put stuff out there and go, okay, I don't know if this is really going to land, but at least we're prototyping something that changes the conversation. And yes, probably our auditor of our Innovate grant is more used to seeing a PDF report than a kind of link to a virtual gallery that he can explore with his phone in 3D space. But it's very important to have that space to, you know, that was the gift that was granted us by that funding, and it's really important to be able to have that kind of supportive space in these residencies where you can go, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I'm not sure. And maybe week 2 is going to be a little bit weird and I won't talk about it.
Nimrod.
Just to add something that Thomas said before, but also on this about experimentation, and I think it's, for us as a small medium organization, it's important to remain kind of this grassroots. Starting in Happy Week, a place it's very much DIY, very much you bring people together, take the technologies and just push the boundaries of what it can do, not necessarily kind of thinking on what it's supposed to do, but like, what is the artistic, what is the cultural elements that we can extract from that. So we've done many of those projects, and I think this is where the magic, or the really the beauty of creating art and the experimentation comes to life. And I think then it brings together also the focus of what we're supposed to do. We're working with cutting-edge technologies, so it's always thinking of the future, but with a kind of present look onto that. And I think it's very important to keep track on what we're doing and continuously kind of criticize whatever's coming out to the market. And I feel that the majority of those that are supposed to do that are artists and creative people within that world. And it's very exciting to see when something comes out, how the world or the industry adopts it, but then how the artists take it and just move it and push it somewhere else. And that point is very, very critical.
I'm wondering whether we should ask if anyone out there has any questions. But what I wanted to just add, because I can right now, is I think sometimes it's difficult to imagine what that means. How do you push technologies? How do you take commercial things and make them creative? Like, oh, what is that like? Oh, but the thing I'm obsessed with is like taking something really mundane and boring, like the pop-up. So like web browsers have pop-ups, your phones have, like, you can make these really fun and weird and creative and interactive, and we've used these for like digital wayfinding. So how do you find your way around like a kind of online experience? We've also used them to be like weird robot-y type sort of helper things, and I think that's where artists can kind of rethink a kind of normal, so it's technology, but it's also a kind of operating model. It's like we're sort of programmed into it by the world around us, and like that's where we can go, oh, but what's more fun about this? That's what I think about that. Does anyone have anything out there?
Yeah.
Can I add something to the pop-up? Because we've done something with pop-up as well. As you say, it's kind of niche and small, but we've done an exhibition that basically brings the art to the audience, rather than the audience goes
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
website, just pops with a different artwork as part of an exhibition.
I
And we're
love
working
that.
on this and developing it to allow other institutions to use that. So it's another form of communication. We see it a bit like social media platforms where actually the work or the content reaches the audience rather than vice versa, us seeking the audience. So I like the fact that you mentioned that, because it's just a very mundane, very small thing that you can just push and pull out and do whatever you want.
Mundane, the performer, the artists, I want to bring back to that. Get the technology, get rid of all. You want to do the art centre of the future, you've got to also centre the artists first. So the example, because 2020 was a big learning curve. So I managed to do 2 big projects in 2020, one of which was New Unlocked, which is a 3-day online festival. Some of it was pre-recorded, but some of it was streamed live. But it was about the artist still being able to perform to the audience, because you weren't allowed to do it. So it's breaking that barrier. The other thing we did was, thanks to these guys in Royal Dots, is do a live stream from Lighthouse 93. Now that was creative. We lived on that boat for 3 days with a circus company called Slugbird and a film company called Deadbeat Films. So the film company and Slugbird, we worked together to work out how you're going to make that space into a performance space and then stream it and stuff. So I learned a lot about streaming in that. But there's that thing. It's not putting the technology between the thing, but how do you use that to get the artist to the audience? I mean, we also did, this summer, we did Certain Blacks is my company, by the way. Certain Blacks.
Clyde Little from
that.
Certain Blacks, who's
sorry,
amazing here in Newham.
But we also, we're a part of Without Walls, which is a big national network of outdoor work. But what we managed to do on the Hoop this year was live stream the outdoor stuff from the Royal Docks. So it's not easy. If you check some of the things, they're coming out in the wrong boxes and stuff, because it's all done on the Hoop. But it's that sort of thing where we've learnt that technology, whereas before, you asked me 2019, I'd be going, what? You want me to do what?
Yeah.
So, and this time, they gave me 2 weeks this year, and we went, right, got people on board, streamed it, and did the whole festival. So I'm talking about, when you talk about the artist centre of the future, where's that space? How are you set up there to do that sort of stuff? Not the pop-up, not recreate stuff which is born digital, but engage people through digital, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'd love to just pick up on that because, and I got you, Patrick, because I think what's really great about it is always remembering the why, right? It can be really easy to go, oh, I've got this headset, I've got this cool stuff, you know, but why? How do we want people to feel? And it's the same way that you would use any kind of technology in any kind of performance space. A light, you know, it used to be a candle, now it's a light, right? It's, sorry, I could go on forever. The point is, it's all about how are you trying to make people feel, what is the thing that's happening, and how do we start to build these spaces where we're not narrowing the opportunities for the people who are going to be able to go into that next space, but actually saying, this is just a part of our language now, this is how we make work. So that was, and you know, we all collectively went through a paradigm shifting experience as a planet, never mind just as a sector. And so we don't get to ignore it anymore, right? Patrick.
Hi, thanks for such an interesting discussion. Patrick Chow from the Audience Agency. I think it was 2013 when we did a study for Innovate UK about co-design in the creative industries and looking forwards 5 years. And I think back then, probably quite a lot of the things we could have imagined technically were still quite hard, whereas perhaps now you might say that many of the technical constraints are gone and most of the things you can imagine you can do. I think at that time, there was a series of conversations I had with people, literally from TV to design to fashion to the arts, and I got out my old course book about theories of authorship.
This is very important.
And Cimeon and I have talked about this before, and it just feels like actually what we're talking about is that theory of authorship. It's like who's making the meaning, who's determining what the meaning is, and the process of making meaning, who's in charge, power. And in fact, I remember having some wonderful conversations with some Innovate UK assessors about dynamics of power, which is not a conversation I ever expected to have with them. Sorry, it sounds like a very academic question, but how do you think that idea of the relationship of power between the audience and the artist needs to change?
I'm just going to repeat that for the microphone and the lovely motorbike outside. Moving forward, how might we look at changing the power dynamics between artists and audiences? And I would add institutions.
Yeah.
Who wants to pick up on that? I think everybody would have something super interesting to say. As an artist, how do you feel about, I mean, that actually is a very personal question in a way, but...
About power dynamics between...
Audiences, artists, authorship, institutions, like who controls the money and the technology and the voice, the relationships with artists, and what does that mean with audiences?
Sorry, we do this all the time as we back. But like thinking about your work, where the garden is created by a user, like what's the meaning? Who created that meaning? Like, did you co-create it, and who owns it, and who should own it, and therefore then what can be reproduced and what can be monetized? I mean, they're further down the line, but like from kind of fundamental immanence in the terms of Benjamin.
My instinct is to say maybe this isn't really helpful at all. My instinct is to say I'm not bothered who owns it. And we might have done it together. Maybe
does that change if people start making lots of money though?
I guess, I don't know. Maybe.
Sorry, I've got to
makes the money.
I want to pop in with this because there's something Cimeon and I have talked about a lot, which is why are certain parts of the arts and culture sector, like, I am a monk with poverty vows, versus things like, sort of parts of the fine art industry, parts of the fashion industry, film, television that are, can just go astronomically making huge amounts of money. And what is the binary difference there? Is it, the pursuit of doing good versus the pursuit of making profit? Is it value versus popularity? And so who owns the thing? We always say it's because with things that can make money, it's because somebody can take it for themselves. They can take a piece of work and own it and take it home. Whereas theater is communal and fleeting, or communal arts experiences, it's hard to have ownership of that.
Can I add a question for
Yeah,
bullet point? Then
absolutely.
How do you get people to pay the same thing they would have for physical experience in a room? And seeing it from the comfort of their own home? We've all struggled with that over the last couple of years, but value. So then, is it cheapened because I'm used to paying $9.99 for Netflix per month? How do we then convey and market and message value? Question mark.
I mean, the point you make is really important in relation to what happened in the pandemic with the National Theatre and the Royal Opera House, because being slightly unfair to them, in another industry, in another economic sector, they would call it dumping. They basically took all of their digital content and dumped it online, and that immediately creates an oversupply. Sorry, I'm interested in economics, and the value of the work out there is decreased. And not only is it decreased, who can compete with the? And so they if there are many ways to think about quality, but if pure technical quality is one of the dimensions, how do you compete with the National Theatre's budgets? So you have a real kind of
It's
challenge.
like a short-term public
It's a short-term public service.
But with the economic things, two things that came out of the stuff we put online. Two of the pieces about, it was a loss leader, they were free to go out, but two of those pieces got picked up. One by the Young Vic, which was, they were up there anyway, conundrum, but it convinced the Young Vic to do that as a run. The second one, Slava, they got a huge amount of euros out of the show that we did because it was proof of concept. It was, there you go. And also, the thing about digital going digital, I mean, theatre is fleeting, But all the stuff I put on digital, it's up there still. It's all still up there online for people to see. So people are capitalising it. We've done the thing, they've got the money, and they're taking that work that we've then filmed and put up their big production values, and they're getting more money out of it. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that's not the end of that economic chain.
Yeah.
There's another element to this value that, for us at least, as a charity, that don't charge pay-per-view and this sort of thing. So it's about audiences. So instead of audiences coming to the gallery, being able to cater for 300,000 people going to our online platform, though it doesn't directly translate to money in the bank, it translates to a different type of value that is very important for us, and that's what we want to do. And the audiences are there. It's the content that needs to be done in the right way and delivered in the right way to be very strong and to add that value that is missing. Just one last thing about the value, I think, authorship, because today Getty announced that they won't put on their database any images that are AI text-to-image generated. So I think can add another layer of this idea of copyright and authorship and ownership towards what we do within the digital realm and who owns things that are made by computers and machine learning. And I think that then you think about the difference between human-made and computer-made, and where is really the value here. I think these places are really interesting to continue to explore, because many artists use that. Rafik Anadol, who's a famous projection mapping artist, uses a lot of machine learning. He does the work, but then the computer continues that for him. So I guess the question is, where does his practice start and end, and then where the computer's practice starts.
Let's explore that. Let's do one last question.
Two, because Ben. Really
yeah,
wants to.
and Ben, by the way, we should say this is Kay's glorious space,
Right.
and we're so grateful to be here. Yeah, we'll do Ben and then Adrian and.
Cool. Anytime. Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on the concept of dumping, because whilst I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, I do think that it's one of those things that's maybe a short-term gain, a short-term pain for a long-term gain, because it maybe is on the responsibility of those larger companies who have all of that content to say to people, look, this is what you can access online. Short-term, maybe that's free, maybe that diminishes the value, but long-term, like, I mean, you look at the likes of Netflix, and they're all increasing their prices.
Yeah.
Disney turned around and put films out online, and you had to pay to watch a new film. Suddenly people are sitting there thinking, why would I pay to watch a film at home? Because I don't want to go to the cinema and spend £12, but I've got to sit at home on my own sofa and pay £12 to watch a film. I think it is the responsibility of large corporates and larger businesses or charities to actually say to people, look, this is the value of the industry. And there is a bit of short-term pain there for small businesses. I feel it here. But I think it will benefit everyone in the long term.
It's fun to be vocative.
Yeah, I was just going to build on that as well. I think I'm a tech entrepreneur, work in the tech sector.
Our board member, Adrian Minster.
Yeah. Just to be a groupie, really. And so I think just hearing you all speak, somebody who's coming from more of a tech investment background, that's what they're buying. They're buying audience. So if you have a platform through which you can reach users, like your game, my old investment banker only does gaming deals now, right? Like if you can create something that creates an experience which reaches people, engages people, then transmits, whether that's in person that then is taken digital or a combination purely digital, both ideally, that's value, right? And so I think what you guys are building here, it sounds like you've got this very cool ecosystem that's creating exactly that sort of platform that enables artists like Thomas to come in and produce something either in person or virtually that then goes on and on and on. And if you can reach that audience and build that community, that's valuable, not just in social experience, that's value to people who are
Capital.
writing checks. Not just from lovely arts organizations, which are wonderful in sponsoring these lovely experiences, or coffee shops down the road that are enabling community, right? So all of that comes together. Just don't underestimate the value of the assets that you guys are producing,
in my opinion, you own that work. Yes, your users co-create that with you, but that happens every single day when a user plays a game on their phone.
And the asset isn't always the work, it's actually the relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the experience. It's
Yeah.
experience, right, of it. And you've created that experience. You had the idea about that experience in the same way that any tech entrepreneur would have an idea and create an experience. You just happen to be a creative who is by nature entrepreneurial, like, because that is the definition of being creative. You're creating. So yeah, thank you. For enabling that. I'm inspired. I'm like, it's great.
Thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Oh,
I'm
Donna,
sorry.
how can I?
Well, I just want to, because I wonder, because if the value then lies in the audience and the relationship, it makes it tricky for the artist, doesn't it? Because when you've made a work, your labour is represented in the work, and then the value is in the work. But if the relationship to the audience, it becomes about retaining that audience, and then the work is constantly, indeed, and then, so it's almost like a constant churn of work, rather than the sort of distinct modules of work that have their individual value. I just thought I'd voice that because it's like a change. It changes the nature of your own work.
And it's also part of the reason individual artists often become very disenfranchised, because institutions tend to own the relationships instead of artists. And that's changing now with all of the platforms that we have, and that's really valuable. Alex Jameson from the Royal Docks Culture Team, who is also, they are a big sponsor of ours, and we're very, very grateful.
We're very pleased to have you.
So please continue this conversation or any other conversations that you might find interesting. We're going to put some music back on. We're going to serve some more drinks. Thanks again to Royal Docks. Thanks again to Ben. And thanks again to our wonderful panel.
Please do stick around, because we've got DJ Big Hen.
DJ Big Hen in the